My name is Janet Edmond, and I work for Conservation International. We are one of the big international biodiversity conservation organizations. We've been around since 1987, and we work in 30 countries and have projects in about 100 countries. Our mission is biodiversity conservation and human well-being. So, fostering approaches that help people live in harmony with nature. We work through a variety of approaches like science, building the evidence for successful biodiversity conservation. We work in partnership. About 30% of our annual budget goes to partners around the world. And we very much are looking at sustainable community engagement. CI has since 2012 had a specific engagement trying to be more conflict sensitive in our environmental work. And that has led us to really dig deep into the links between conflict, conservation, natural resource management, and peace. So that's the overview of kind of where we are. And then our environmental peace building work has really been happening since about 2012, so about 10 years now. We really have more specifically looked at the root causes of conflict in a variety of our conservation work. So looking at ocean conservation, what are the root causes in many coastal communities? What are the root causes in many of our forest protected area, our landscapes, and then working with partners to really build capacity to look more at conflict dynamics, social contexts, and how we can more proactively work to address conflict in these diverse contexts. When it comes to looking at monitoring and evaluation in our peace building work, we kind of have to go back to where we started with the work. We started raising awareness about conflict dynamics in our conservation programming. We, kind of look back retrospectively, and while a lot of our field teams who are working at the grassroots level, while they wouldn't have said they were working on environmental peace building, they did recognize that throughout 60%, 70% of our programs, there were conflicts that were happening in the areas where CI was engaging with communities and government and civil society. And we were doing a lot of the stakeholder engagement, a lot of the negotiation, building conservation agreements, using different tools so that we were proactively addressing conflict and trying to prevent or mitigate conflict. So we did, kind of reflect that we do have this history of working on conflict. And so as we were kind of building out our program, we decided to create a manual, a training manual for how could we do a better job of more intentionally looking at conflict in our work, talking about it, getting people comfortable with the concept, because often the word conflict can cause people to have a lot of stress. People tend to want to avoid conflict. And so just by talking about it and making it less, of a mystery or less stressful, just by saying conflict is a part of life and it's all about how you address it, we were able to kind of transform the conversation. And in our very first environmental peace building training manual, which we put together with the help of many, many partners in the environmental peace building world, we intentionally put in a section on monitoring and evaluation, knowing that there is always this call for evidence. Show me the evidence. Why is addressing conflict at the beginning more sustainable? Why is it better? What does it get us? And so we did do that. And we have used it with a variety of success. I wouldn't say we have great, like evidence right now. We're still working on building the evidence, and we're trying and testing approaches in many of our field programs and with many of our partners. And so in talking about CI's institutional indicators and kind of the context for monitoring evaluation, CI has, our like guiding stars. That's our institutional strategy. We work very much preventing and mitigating climate change. And we are very much building evidence with science. We're also looking at innovative financing and a thing we call planet positive economies, which is really sustainable landscapes and seascapes, and making sure that livelihoods are matched with sustainable development. One thing we don't have, we're such a big organization, it's really hard to capture at the high level, what is our impact? Our indicators are hectares preserved or conserved, which is really counting, those places where we work. Carbon stored, which again is a, kind of counting thing. People who are benefiting from socioeconomic benefits of conservation in the places where we work, and then species that are conserved. So those indicators, they don't tell a whole lot of they're built from the bottom up, but they don't tell a long story. So really what we are very much focused on is implementing monitoring evaluation in the places where we work where conflict is, with some more kind of peace related indicators or conflict related indicators. And that definitely takes, a conversation with the field teams, looking at our donors. Where are the donors that we have that are really interested in conflict, and how can we build those indicators so that the on the ground work is really collecting the data in a sensitive way and being able to build the story of what's going on there and how are we helping change the dynamic for good. With monitoring evaluation, you're looking at quantitative indicators, which is the counting of stuff, right? Whether it's a species or a hectare or people that are participating or being trained. But really that doesn't give you the full picture. So we complement a lot of our monitoring evaluation work with qualitative information. So that's more of, say, like targeted focus groups where we get together, being mindful of the gender differences between men and women accessing natural resources. We'll have a focus group with women only, or we'll have a focus group with youth, or we'll look at different segments of the populations that are in the communities where we live, and how do we want to get information more rich and detailed, very much protecting their identity in this process. But how do we get the real story of the place where we're working, and how can we do that in a conflict sensitive way so that we're not causing harm? We don't want to do no harm. We want to do no harm, sorry. So really using a variety of monitoring evaluation tools and ways to kind of get at the different types of data to really get the underlying, story of what's happening in a place. So those are some of the things that we do. Very much the places where CI works, we have been working there for a long time. So we rely on the leaders in those places, and we do like a lot of key informant interviews. We do a lot of geographic information system mapping, where we kind of try to match that physical conditions with some of the socioeconomic conditions. Those are the types of information that we'll get from focus groups or from other kind of information gathering, stakeholder meetings, that kind of thing, where we may have to tailor them for the different audiences that we're working with, and really trying to get at information that may be sensitive. There may be some situations where we work that are violent contexts, and we have to be very sensitive about who we bring together and who we ask questions of, and trying to be really working with the local communities and the leaders in that aspect.
I am Fernando Guerra. I currently work with CI, Conservation International, under the position of Senior Coordinator of Carbon Projects. I have 15-year experience working with conservation programs. I come from Peru. I was born in Peru, and I live in a city called Moyobamba, which is the capital of the San Martin department in Peru, in the north, yeah, of the country, in the Amazon, the northeast of the country, in the Amazon. This area was created in 1987. The protected area, since it was created, it had some difficulties because it didn't have the resources needed to be able to be administered since those years, or I mean, from when it began. What happened was that after 13 years, about 13 years, the government established the first office to protect forests. It was in Rioja City, which is the jurisdiction where the natural protected area is located. However, in those years that went by, from the moment it was created till the protection actually started, there was a population settlement. They had migrated from the Indian region in Peru. They were attracted by the economic boom of coffee and they settled there. That's also being facilitated or driven by the construction of a road that connected the Peruvian jungle with the coast, right? With the coastal area in Peru. They've taken possession there, they've settled there, and when the protected area was established there, but there were very little resources. There were just four forest rangers plus there weren't many administrative agents. There were already population there, and when they conduct activities for surveillance and control to protect this conservation area, it caused conflicts between the population and the authority, the state. I mean, one of the flaws we ran into back then was also to have trained staff in this position of forest rangers. We're talking about 2001 to 2003 when the area was established in the end, and the forest rangers did not have the communication tools to be able to pass on the information and to explain the importance of the protected area. And it rather caused conflict between the local settlers, those that had settled there, and the authorities. The population, or yes, the people that settled there, attracted by other, let's say, people with dark interests, those that offered lands, they would sell, say they would sell the lands to them and they give them a certificate that didn't have any legal support. They attracted more and more people, but it was a scam. And given the absence of the state, they were more and more present there. And they even requested some basic utilities from the local governments or the city governments that are around there in that jurisdiction. The municipalities were also another stakeholder that were against the conservation of the protected area because they also ignored the importance of the protected area. Then in 2008 with CI, when CI came to explore and to cooperate with the Peruvian state to work on this project that we've been implemented. The project mm, had a big challenge that was to work together with the population and avoid that conflicts would escalate more and more. That conflict that was already there, it was already intense because the state would not allow them to conduct any activity. The only position of the state was that they had to leave the land. Conservation International then suggested that the state would use an important tool, which is to sign agreements, conservation agreements. It's a very important instrument that would allow working together between the population and the state. And the approach of called it's a win-win. The state wins, the people win, and conservation wins. What did the tool mean? It meant that the state would commit itself to provide training, guidance, and advice so that the settlers could carry out their productive activities and generate some economic income, of course, enough to be able to make a living and preserve the area. So this at the beginning posed some doubts, but it also meant a commitment from the settlers to avoid or stop deforesting in high risk areas and to damage or harm the ecosystems. They would stop doing that. Along the history of the project, especially given its structures, we have the work of the forest rangers. Around this project, we have about 7 control or points or checkpoints. These are zones with infrastructure where they are located. That's where they are located, so that they can implement surveillance and control activities. They patrol, and along the way, the experience has shown that we can identify the forest rangers' work is dangerous, even with the population they run into and they have to interact with, but also other risks related to the field work. For example, uh, they might be bitten by a snake, there's wildlife, or also the difficult land itself. They could get injured, they could trip over, fall, so on. The most important thing to us has been to find this interaction with the population that first opposed the project, but it's meant an opportunity. They have they have sometimes kidnapped forest rangers. They have attacked them. But at the beginning with the project, we try to produce a protocol. We agreed on this protocol between the coordinators and the managers, those who led the project administration on behalf of the state. They had an administration contract and the management committee. These organizations would help identify the risks to be able to carry out actions that would allow avoid the occurrence of risks or the materialization of risks so that we could protect the forest rangers. Then later we realized that the tool could help us actually improve the situation. So in the last few years, at least the last 2 years, we have innovated this risk matrix. We've identified the risks and we've been able to work in a participatory manner with the rainforest team. They are the ones, I'm sorry, the forest rangers team. They know the work done to be done and they are aware of the risks. Okay, I was talking about the sequence of events and the work and analysis and risk management, the work we've done with the forest rangers. We work through a matrix. We use a matrix that allows us to have a sequence of steps to measure the impact and the importance of everything that happens in the work we do with forest rangers. The matrix is formed by 3 key steps and a fourth one, which would allow us to see whether something has failed, especially during the implementation. The first step for us to include in the matrix is to identify risks. In this matrix, we can prioritize, first of all, we can identify all the risks that could appear, could, I don't know, arise or something the forest rangers may spot based on what they've lived in the past. So we come up with a list. It's a list of risks. The methodology we apply is between 15 to 20 risks. In some of the cases, we've identified a media of 18. That's the average. And then we've been able to identify together with the forest rangers the causes of the risks. Why do these risks come up? And what situations and why in those situations? And then we analyze the occurrence of the possible occurrence, and then we assess the consequences that those risks may bring. So we identify them, we analyze the causes, why the risks appear, and then we analyze what consequences we might face. That's the first analysis, let's say. After that, we carry out a second step where we assess in numbers, in quantitative fashion, the risks so that we give them high values or values to prioritize them. With the matrix, we give them a scale. We rank the values from 1 to 5. 1 is the lowest one. 3 represents mid value, and 5 represents high value in the occurrence. We start to assess, and then we have a multiplication of impact probability. I mean, how often, when it could appear, and how bad it would be. That's a subjective variable, though. We work there with the forest rangers. And usually the social component is key based on the experience and based on what's happened, based on the work we've done, especially with the physical attacks or kidnap cases that's happened with local settlers. Okay, this is something that usually comes up. This conflict or that risk reappears. However, during step 3, when we analyze and prioritize the 5 main risks to find or to produce an action plan or a contingency plan that would help us reduce the impact that might be caused by the occurrence of the risk, right? So we begin to identify actions. We also identify a budget. And in our protected area, in our project, one of the very important duties we do, and we should not forget, is to prioritize the stakeholders, those do those who may provide strengths or strengths to be able to overcome the risks. This is all included in the matrix. Also, the budget to see if in our project we are doing right planning, especially financial planning, so that we wouldn't have any difficulties with the budget, with the located budget. Once we've done that, we begin to monitor. To monitor, we use some indicators from the implementation, the percent after the implementation of the prioritized activities together with the forest ranger team. And that's also based on visits and constant meetings that we hold the specialists on surveillance and control, and he comes from the state institution. We do field visits to see how the actions have been implemented. And the other indicator that also we get is the occurrence level, the number of instances or the events that have been escalated have materialized, when the risk has materialized. Something we highlight in step 4 is a plan that we call, hold on, the contingency plan. I'm sorry, 3. I got confused there. The contingency plan that allows us to carry out actions that would go beyond what we could have analyzed in the prevention plan. The contingency plan leads to actions that go beyond our institutional role. And that's where we need to identify the institutions beforehand. Those partner institutions, they could be a very important partner during conflict. Like I said before, we adhere to a protocol, that protocol that I mentioned at the beginning of the project. The protocol has helped us build together so the members of the team, all the forest rangers can implement and can intervene, participate in the actions in the plan so that together as teamwork, we can implement this and we can avoid that these risks create a bigger impact. We believe this tool may be used in different projects, but what's even more in work with the forest rangers. The importance, and I can stress this again, the importance of the tool is that it's participatory and it conducts deep analysis of those who are deeply involved in the implementation of the activities of the project. If we implement this matrix at the since step one, by identifying the conflict, identifying the risks there could be, or the risks the forest rangers may come across, we reflect together with them. We can conclude that many of the actions to prevent, or many prevention activities, I'm sorry, are within the team itself, and we can avoid these risks. I think it's a great opportunity anywhere in the world, if they, wherever there's this interaction with settlers. So we can use this matrix to strengthen the forest rangers in protected areas. It's important that they understand and participate and especially use the tool. Working on the matrix, while building the matrix, we've been able to perceive that the forest ranger team, they required the tool to do organized planning, I would say, and I guess more attached, or that would correspond more to reality. This was important to conduct this analysis, to have this as a project, but then implement it, build it together with the team, the forest ranger team. I think a lot of information we have represents high quality information, because information is valuable. We'll know that. I think we could try it somewhere else, but we need to respect the realities, the social context of each location, each context, and how see how projects are executed in other places or in other regions. That's an important point to keep in mind, to avoid that the we just pass on the learning from Peru to other places, because each context we know is different. The lessons learned, something I might have mentioned at the end, is the evolution of this matrix, or the dashboard. We call it dashboard, the conflict dashboard. At the beginning, like I said, this is something we did at the coordinator level and the decision makers, the for the risk analysis. It was closed, tight information back then. Also, given the big information leak that we were afraid it would happen. But then we realized that what also happened is that the implementing team, those in the field, they were up to date with the tasks, but they couldn't understand how they could do their activities. And as much as they received instructions on how to implement the activities, they would forget the protocol easily, or the steps. So the lesson learned, or the takeaway, is to build the we need to build this together with everyone's participation, to build the risk matrix, and we give each individual an opportunity to identify the consequences, first of all the causes, and then the consequences of what's happening. Another takeaway is that we can implement or develop actions in the area of prevention or contingency in an isolated manner. Just the institutions, one institution at a project, but we need them all. We need the state institutions, we need the civil society, those who have experience resolving these social conflicts in case anything goes wrong, or if we want to implement a prevention plan immediately. We need to ask for their help, these levels or these institutions, so that we can coordinate things together. We provide advice, and we receive also their support to actually create impact. I think those are two big takeaways. Also, in our project, the project escalated up to violence. It was the milestone that made us reflect, especially in 2016, when there was a kidnap for some of the forest rangers were temporarily kidnapped, and we had to resort to the state, those who had experience in negotiation. That was I don't know, a way to improve the tool to conduct the analysis and then identify the institutions that can provide their support to us in specific points in time and to work in a way or in a fashion that we anticipate the conflict. That's what I mean. Now, challenges. We want to continue to consolidate this governance. The governance is in charge of administering their space, which is cooperate, we provide support. Technical support and financial support, but we also need the institutions, especially government bodies, to continue to see the natural protected area not as a space that is there isolated within a national territory, but rather they should be able to assess and cherish the value of ecosystemic services and the importance for human well-being in an administrative and political system here in Peru. The authorities change, they rotate every 4 years. In those authorities that many times they come, but they don't take into account, they're not aware of what protected area means. That's why we have this chance to continue to articulate with the new administration and make them understand that we need their support and then we can work together. Another challenge is to consolidate the work with the settlers, the local population. And there's the importance to develop the activities, communication activities with the forest ranger team, those who are there in daily contact with the population, so that they would be the ones passing on or conveying the good intentions of the work we do with them in the protected area. What we seek to do is to improve their living conditions, but in exchange for conservation of the forests there in the Atomayo forest. It's one of the important challenges that we need to continue work on, because unless we do this internally, it'll be very hard to convey this idea externally to other bodies. Maybe not daily, but we still need the political support, technical support of the higher instances, the public bodies, those that have an interest in these areas.
We just published a lessons learned report from about the last 10 years of our experience. We've had such a rich experience working with our CI field programs, in places in the Amazon. We've worked in places like Kenya with partners who are really on the front lines of some really, very post-conflict, also in conflict areas. So drawing from some of those experiences and lessons, we've discovered that approaching conflict and talking about conflict, really looking at the local context is critical. Being very mindful of when talking about conflict can even cause conflict, and how really knowing the area is critical. We had one workshop in an area where it started out very participatory. We had a range of government, civil society together, and the more that the word conflict was used, the more that people got really kind of hesitant, and the workshop got a little bit derailed. And so our staff had to go back and work with the players and the stakeholders in that meeting to kind of come to an agreement about kind of what the conversation would be about and how they would frame it. And so just using that word conflict sometimes can cause red flags. And so just putting it in more of a socially kind of acceptable way to talk about it without avoiding the topic, but approaching it from different ways is really important to get people to be comfortable. We also, have engaged a lot of our protected area staff in places where we work with governments. So really being mindful of their role and our role, and trying to open up communications about conflict, really trying to diffuse, potentially escalating situations with ways of de-escalating anger, ways to approach people's needs with a little bit more kind of a conflict sensitive way. So we've tried a bunch of different approaches like that. I think I kind of mentioned the gender dynamics. being really mindful of places where maybe women are not going to speak up in a public venue, but you can get very rich information when you have more targeted discussions, or you kind of, have a meeting that's like closer to where the women are doing an activity that's related to conservation or something like that, in a way to get more information that would maybe not be apparent. So, and then being very intentional to collect data that is both male and female, and often now we're talking about intersectionality, so also talking about vulnerable groups and other parts of a society. And so really being able to have a much fuller picture of the on-the-ground context. And one thing that CI is known for is our storytelling, the ability to kind of take a place and really fully show what's going on and capture, the human needs, the human development, the human connections with nature. Those are really compelling. So we've done a lot of storytelling with our work, and really showing how critical nature is for people and for all of us, really, for sustainable conservation. So I think those are the main ones. And then when it comes to looking forward, I mentioned CI is a science-based organization. So we do have one ongoing project right now that we're really excited about. It's happening in Kenya, and we're working with our field team there and our colleagues in the Moore Center for Science to look at climate change and conflict in the communities, kind of in central Kenya, and looking at what are the conflict drivers. Some of it is human-wildlife conflict, some of it is human-human conflict. And so really doing a baseline survey and trying to get focus group information and finding out what indicators are best for us to monitor progress. And that's all done under the context of a global ecosystem-based adaptation project. So we'll hopefully see some of the results from that in about summer of 2023. And it will be presented maybe, the end of 2023 in more global fora looking at climate change. And we're really excited about types of those projects because we really do want to show, the evidence that we really need to be paying attention to the conflict drivers in all of our work, like from the beginning. I think reflecting on our lessons learned over the past 20 years, we've really seen that there are many of us who really believe in our core that looking at conflict is really important to, building peace, building positive peace, and it's really the necessary underpinning for conservation. I think as we go forward in the field, it's going to be really important for us to have these examples and to have the evidence to show to our colleague conservation organizations, the funders like the Global Environmental Facility, the Green Climate Fund, that really, building in conflict analysis and drivers and conflict sensitivity from the beginning is key to really the future of the global biodiversity and global climate change movement. And so I think we have a lot of momentum, we have a lot of interest, and I think more examples, from other organizations and our colleagues are going to be really critical as we go forward.